Michael McCarthy's world shatters when his wife, Deirdre Lancaster, fakes amnesia after a mysterious car crash. Behind her lies, she's hiding an affair with Julian, a ghost from her past. Desperate for answers, Michael uncovers the twisted truth and confronts Deirdre in a high-stakes hospital showdown. Betrayal, deception, and revenge collide as Michael fights to expose the dark secrets that threaten to destroy everything. Can he survive the ultimate betrayal, or will it consume him? I never imagined the woman I loved would betray me. Deirdre's wild nights were filled with dangerous secrets, surrounded by deceit and reckless behavior that tarnished her father's legacy. Confronting her, the lies poured out, leaving me heartbroken. But beneath it all, I uncovered a sinister plot, and I was determined to expose her to her father. Her tears became my vindication, and I vowed she would pay for every deceitful act. I could have imagined many things happening to me. A plane crash, perhaps. Or cancer like my father, who died at 57 from lung cancer, likely due to exposure to chemicals during his years searching for oil. He chose to end his life on his own terms, flying his plane into the Atlantic rather than wasting away in a hospital. We honored his choice with a toast at O'Brien's, a bar where my father was well known. Reflecting on my past, I regret the hurt I caused by my reckless actions, sleeping with women without considering the consequences. Marriage made me realize the pain I had inflicted. At 25, I met Deirdre, who changed everything. Her red hair and slim figure caught my eye, though her sharp tongue often kept me on edge. Despite her beauty, she was not my type. Too young, too thin. I preferred older, curvier women. Deirdre was the only daughter of Orion Lancaster, owner of one of the world's largest oil companies. My father had worked for Lancaster for 10 years and was close to him, so I knew their story well. Deirdre's mother had died giving birth to her, and Lancaster cherished her as a miracle child. His second marriage ended in scandal when it was revealed that his son was not his own, and Lancaster ensured the boy would never inherit his fortune. From a young age, I was drawn into the oil business, following my father on trips. By 10, I was traveling with him, with the condition that I kept up my grades. My father's influence shaped me, and Lancaster's legacy loomed large in my life. She was worried, but he assured her he turned out fine after a similar experience. Later, they went to the bedroom, and Mom reluctantly agreed. Dad was a good man, raised in the tough oil fields of Oklahoma and Texas. He didn't think a boy trying drinks and cigars was harmful, though he knew he had to face Mom eventually. But he couldn't watch me all the time. At a small fishing village in Mexico, I met an 18-year-old girl with long black hair. I was 13, almost 14, and she was mesmerizing. We spent 2 weeks together, and I fell in love. But she left me for a 20-year-old fisherman who won her over with just a smile. Hearts heal quickly at 13. I grew tall and strong like my dad, who had a knack for finding oil and became a millionaire 3 times before I was 10, though he lost it all each time. That's why he settled for a steady job at Oil Inc. By 25, I had worked in places from Canada to Africa, making good money and enjoying life until I met Deirdre Lancaster. That was a mistake. You'll see why. The first time I saw her, she was stumbling into her dad's mansion, reeking of alcohol, barely able to stand. One of her nearly naked friends grabbed me through my jeans, joking about my bulge. Then Deirdre vomited into a vase, and her friends followed suit, unable to hold their drinks. The staff rushed to clean up the mess. I was there for a dinner with Lancaster to discuss oil, but I was ready to leave. Lancaster approached me and asked for a word. Despite my impatience, I respected him and followed him to one of his many libraries. He apologized for Deirdre's behavior, explaining she'd been troubled since her mother died when she was 10. He'd tried to compensate with girlfriends, companions, and tutors, but it wasn't the same as having a mother. He acknowledged that while I had my wild side, his daughter's situation was different. He then mentioned my upcoming trips to South America. I worked for Oil Inc., but I had the freedom to take on side projects. I had already discovered 2 significant oil fields, one in Cuban waters. Lancaster then leaned in, expressing his respect for my work and instincts, but asked for a personal favor. He explained that other major powers, including the Chinese, Russians, and Saudis, were aware of a potential oil field in the Brazilian rainforest. The Saudis, in particular, were desperate to secure future oil resources as their current supplies dwindled. We had a slight lead, but it could vanish quickly. We've secured some key allies in the Brazilian government and built good relationships with local tribes, but our lead is fragile. Lancaster, with his rough hand missing a finger, a reminder of his early days, placed it on my knee. He had scars from building his company, and though he wore a suit now, the field had marked him. He understood the risks of my work and asked me to stay in Jacksonville for a few weeks. His daughter Deirdre was on break from the University of Florida. She was brilliant, graduating high school early and advancing quickly in college, but with too much free time, she became a target. Men often pursued her for the wrong reasons, and she was clever enough to outmaneuver most of her guards. I couldn't believe he wanted me to pause a major oil project to babysit his daughter. He nodded seriously, emphasizing that while oil deals come and go, he only had one daughter. Despite my protests, he insisted I was the right person for the job, someone he could trust like family. He acknowledged my past troubles, but also noted my loyalty and strength, qualities he valued. He revealed that Deirdre had always had a crush on me, though I had hardly noticed her before. She wasn't my type, but Lancaster believed I could handle her, despite my reservations. Reluctantly, I agreed. Instead of heading to Brazil, I found myself at a new bar on Jack's Beach with Deirdre, her friends, and some college guys who eyed me like an unwanted chaperone. As we drank and mingled, Deirdre challenged me to dance. She moved with confidence, pressing against me until I felt the need to step back. I realized that if she kept this up, I might cross lines I shouldn't. I made an excuse to leave the dance floor, and when I returned, I saw a tall guy had taken Deirdre away, standing too close for comfort. Back at her table, Deirdre was slumped over, surrounded by 4 guys, with empty glasses and bottles scattered around. She looked far drunker than the rest, and her female friends were nowhere to be seen. Sensing trouble, I squeezed into the seat next to her, pushing out one of the guys. He glared at me, but I glared back. "Deirdre, you look really out of it. How about we get some coffee and fresh air?" I suggested. She looked up with blurry eyes, barely recognizing me. "My friends will take care of me," she slurred, as one of the guys mockingly agreed. Deirdre's head hit the table with a thud, and she drooled, completely out of it despite not drinking much. Realizing she'd been drugged, I knew I had to get her away from these guys, but a fight would bring more trouble than I wanted. I slipped a $100 bill to a waiter, instructing him to keep an eye on her and call the police if anyone tried to take her. As I led the 3 loudmouths outside, one tried to hit me with a beer bottle. I flipped him over my shoulder, sending him crashing into a crate. The second guy missed his swing, and I quickly incapacitated him with a poke to the eye and a kick to the groin. The third guy, threatening to break my neck, swung at me, but I dodged his punches easily. The fight continued until the Polynesian kid moved in. He tripped me and grabbed my arm, trying to slam me down, but I spun, countering his move just in time, and though nothing broke, I heard him scream as his arm was badly hurt. I turned to see the Polynesian kid approaching, staying relaxed and ready. His eyes told me more than his words. "Are we going to fight?" I asked. "You've had some training," he replied. "Mostly street fighting," I said. "I learn as I go." He nodded, mentioning his black belts in karate and judo, adding, "I could take you, but it might get messy." I shifted into a defensive stance. "Drugging a woman to hurt her isn't fun," I said. "I don't need to hurt women to enjoy myself," he countered, but I wasn't convinced. I warned him that the police would be involved soon and that Deirdre's father wouldn't let this slide. He turned to his friend Bobby, who was writhing in pain. "Relax," he said, easing Bobby's pain. Bobby, still angry, urged him to fight, but Mo hesitated. "This isn't worth it, Bobby. You could lose your arm for a girl. If I take him out, I lose everything too." Mo looked at me. "I know what you did for Bobby. Let's end this peacefully." I stared back, skeptical. "You were trying to hurt the daughter of a man who's been good to me. I can't let that go." He sighed, realizing I didn't understand. "We weren't trying to take advantage of her. Go ask the waiters. She knows us. This has happened before. She acts like a victim, but she enjoys it. It's all a game to her." The revelation stunned me. He offered a choice. Call the cops and deal with the fallout, or let them leave, taking Deirdre to safety. The logical move was to get her out of there and away from the police. "Take your friends and go," I said firmly. "I'll let this go unless your story is a lie. But know this can't end well, no matter how much money Bobby's dad has. One mistake could lead to serious consequences, a police record or worse. You don't need to be doing this." Mo nodded and helped Bobby stand. "Take care of her and I'll handle my friends," he said. I walked back into Pelican's, finding Deirdre slumped over a table. I gently shook her, but she barely responded, mumbling incoherently. Unsure if she was pretending or truly out of it, I picked her up and carried her to my Jeep, hoping she wouldn't get sick on the way. I found a motel on Atlantic Boulevard and, after a stop for coffee and food, settled her into one of the beds. Her red hair spread out on the pillow, and she looked almost ethereal in the dim light, snoring softly. Though not my type, I couldn't deny her beauty. "Deirdre," I whispered, gently touching her cheek. She blinked awake, confused. "Bobby?" she asked. "No, Bobby's not here. I fought him and sent him to the hospital." She blinked again. "You hurt Bobby?" "Not as badly as I could have, but yes." "You're a jerk," she muttered, trying to lift her head before collapsing back down. "Strong drugs can do that," I said. "Sometimes things go well, but sometimes they don't." She groaned. "You're a jerk. I would have been okay." "Maybe," I replied. "But if you're going to get into trouble, let me know. I don't want to end up in jail or hurt your friends." She took slow breaths, clearly feeling the effects. "You're not going to throw up on me, are you?" "I don't think so," she murmured. I sat beside her, lifting her slightly. "It's easier to drink hot coffee sitting up," I said. "I don't want any," she protested. "Just try it," I insisted, offering her the cup. She spat it out. "Too hot. Blow on it, then sip." After a few attempts, she managed to drink some, complaining about the black coffee. "I'm going to tell my dad," she threatened. "He'll fire you and no one will hire you." I calmly replied, "Your dad won't do anything once he hears what you've been up to. And even if he tried, there are plenty of companies that would pay me more." She spat coffee in my face, and without thinking, I slapped her. She stared at me in shock as blood dripped from her lip. "I can't believe you did that," she whispered. "You shouldn't spit hot coffee on someone," I said. Her eyes widened. "You're a bully and you're rude." I walked to the bathroom, returning with a wet cloth and tissues. I dabbed the blood with a cloth, then tissues. Her lip was cut, but not badly. "Are you going to say sorry?" she asked. "Will you?" I replied. "I shouldn't have spat on you," she admitted. "And I shouldn't have hit you. I'm sorry," I said. She wiped the coffee off my face, which stung a bit. "Are you okay?" she asked. "It was just a reflex," I reassured her. "I'll be fine. But don't spit on me again. Try to finish the coffee. It'll help." She reluctantly sipped more, then complained about the black coffee. "I'm going to tell my dad you took me to a motel when I was drunk," she threatened. "He'll fire you." I calmly replied, "Your dad won't do anything once he knows what you've been up to. And even if he tried, I'd find work elsewhere." Suddenly, she spat the coffee in my face, and without thinking, I slapped her. She looked at me in shock as blood dripped from her lip. "You shouldn't spit hot coffee on someone," I said. Her eyes widened. "You're a bully," she muttered. I left to get a wet cloth and returned to clean her up. "Let's see if you can keep the food down," I suggested. She hesitated, but eventually finished the burger. Then she looked at me and said, "I noticed you got a little excited carrying me. For someone who claims I'm not their type, your body says otherwise." I shook my head. "That was just a natural reaction, not about you." She challenged me, asking how many women I'd been with, trying to provoke me. I didn't let it bother me, though the conversation took a more serious turn as she mentioned lost children. Her words struck a nerve, but I kept my cool, admitting that my past mistakes had made me think about the consequences. As we returned to her home, she suggested a swim. I declined, too tired and uninterested in her game. Undeterred, she stripped down to a tiny swimsuit and jumped in the pool. Under the bright lights, she looked stunning, but I reminded myself she wasn't my type. Still, I couldn't just leave her alone. She might call other guys and then we'd be back where we started. But I didn't want to cross Lancaster. He asked me to keep an eye on his daughter, and now I'd lost track of her. She splashed me with water, daring me to chase her. Reluctantly, I jumped in, fully clothed, but she quickly climbed out, taunting me from the edge. She teased me, challenging my strength, but I just stayed in the water, watching. She mocked me for not chasing her, threatening to call friends and find a party. I told her to go ahead if that's what she wanted, but I'd let her dad know. When she saw I wasn't playing along, she jumped back in, swirling around like a mischievous fish until I grabbed her and hauled her out, ignoring her protests. Carrying her into the house, dripping wet, she kicked and yelled, claiming I was kidnapping her. Servants and security rushed in, and I let her go when two big guys grabbed me. Lancaster soon appeared, and I asked to speak with him privately. In the library, I told him everything, and I could see the pain in his eyes. His daughter might think she was grown, but to him, she was still his little girl. When Deirdre was brought in, she tried to lie, but eventually admitted to partying and being with men. Lancaster's face hardened as he reminded her of the risks she was taking, not just with drugs, but with her health. She stayed silent as he gently held her face, reminding her she was all he had left of her mother. He warned her that someday, everything he had would be hers, but only if she lived long enough to inherit it. "Are you really ready to throw everything away for a fling?" he asked. "I'm young. It didn't have to be like this. You could have let Julian stay with me. He loved me, and I loved him. I wouldn't be doing any of this if you hadn't scared him off. You should have let me be with him." He gripped her face tighter, and she flinched. "Julian? That guy got a 16-year-old girl pregnant when he should have been helping her. I didn't scare him away. I offered him $1 million to leave, and he took it without hesitation." "It doesn't matter. You're being watched constantly now. Security will follow you everywhere. Bathroom, movies, class. You'll be tested for drugs every day." "You can't do that? I'm over 18. I'm an adult." "I can have you committed if the drug tests suggest you're a danger to yourself. I can keep you in a private facility for 6 months or more. So you have a choice. Stay here under strict rules, or I'll lock you up as long as I can." "You do that to me just to keep me safe?" she asked, anger and desperation mixing in her voice. Before I could react, she lunged at me with her nails and teeth. I held her back easily, and the security guards quickly pulled her off. Once she was gone, Lancaster turned to me and said, "She's angry now, but she'll calm down." "Thanks," I replied. It certainly made for an interesting Friday night. I thought about going out to find some fun, but instead I took a shower and went to bed, knowing anyone I met would be dull compared to what I'd just been through. Time passed, and another Friday arrived. I had just returned from Miami after 4 exhausting days investigating a potential oil field. Running on barely any sleep and too much coffee, I was looking forward to bed when there was a knock on the door. "Go away! I'm not working," I called out, but the knocking continued. When I opened the door, Deirdre was there with 2 women who looked like pregnant security guards. "What do you want?" I asked. "We're sorry to bother you, Mr. McCarthy," one of the women said. "But Miss Lancaster wants to see you." "What is it?" I replied, exhausted. "I'm sorry about trying to hurt you last time," Deirdre said. "Feeling sorry now?" "A little. Can we move past that?" "Why should we?" "I need a favor. Can we go out for a drink at Jack's Beach? There are some great bands tonight." "Are you crazy? You think I'll risk taking you out and losing you? I promise I won't run away." "That means a lot," I said sarcastically. "Please. The people who take me out don't know anything about music after 1995, and they have no fun. Staying in and reading is better." I glanced at the security women. "Is this okay with Mr. Lancaster?" "He said he trusts you," one replied. I was exhausted, and my bed was tempting, but for some reason, I said yes. It felt like the moment things started to go wrong. We drove down to Jack's Beach, and traffic got worse the closer we got. After paying $50 for a parking spot, we walked to a bar. The place was packed, barely any space to breathe. After 3 beers and a few okay bands, Deirdre leaned over. "I have to go to the bathroom," she said, slipping through the crowd. I paid the bill and went outside, circling around to the alley behind the bar. I saw a few drug deals going down, but when I got tough looks, I stared them down until they went back to their business. I reached the back of the bar where a tall guy with messy blonde hair eyed me, clearly recognizing me. He tried to act tough, raising his hands. "Leave! She won't be free tonight. If you don't get out of here, I'll hurt you." I stepped closer and punched him hard in the nose. He dropped to his knees, crying and clutching his face. I helped him up and sent him on his way. Moments later, a girl with brown hair and a short skirt emerged, looking around. I approached her from behind. "Hey, Deirdre, your friend is gone." As I spoke, I quickly snapped a handcuff onto her wrist and locked the other end onto mine. "McCarthy, what are you doing?" she exclaimed, her eyes widening in shock. "You wanted a night out, right? Now you can have fun without me worrying about you running off." "How did you know?" she asked, clearly frustrated. "I've been around long enough to know that bathroom leads to the alley. I've used it myself. Were you really going to ditch me for that guy?" "No," she admitted. "I just wanted a night of freedom. But now you're going to drag me home and tell my dad, aren't you?" "Not necessarily. We can stay, listen to more bands, and have some drinks. But the handcuffs stay." She agreed, and we went back inside, having drinks and listening to bands. At one point, she convinced me to dance, and as we did, she raised her arms, showing off the handcuffs. It didn't take long for people to notice, and soon they were cheering and laughing, making space for us on the dance floor. We continued bar hopping until 4 a.m., when I finally told her I was done and needed to go. She agreed, and within half an hour we were back at the estate. As I parked, I unlocked the handcuffs. "That was fun," Deirdre said, her hair tousled and her face flushed. "I'm glad you enjoyed it. Now go, I need to sleep." She leaned in and kissed me gently, a soft and uncertain gesture. For a moment, she seemed different. Then she left, joining the security guards while I stumbled into my condo, collapsing into bed still fully clothed. As I drifted off, a sense of unease lingered. I knew something had changed and it wouldn't end well. I didn't see her for 2 weeks, though she crossed my mind now and then. On a restless Saturday with nothing to do, I drove to St. Augustine Beach and walked on the sand, still unsure of what I wanted. Later, back at the Lancaster estate, I enjoyed a fantastic dinner. Tender ribs, roasted asparagus, and the best crab cakes I'd ever had. Lancaster always ensured you ate well if you were on his property. After dinner, I sat on my bed with a glass of good bourbon, courtesy of Lancaster. I wasn't in the mood for TV, movies, or company. Everyone needs a day off sometimes. But then there was a knock at the door. I had a feeling I knew who it was, but I wasn't in the mood to be good company. Deirdre stood there in bright red shorts and a matching top, holding a paper bag in one hand and a stack of DVDs in the other. Her security detail hovered nearby, trying to stay out of sight. "I'm afraid tonight isn't going to work out, Deirdre. I'm not up for partying." "That's fine. I'm not either. I was hoping we could just hang out, smoke a little, drink some, and watch DVDs." "I don't know about that." I hesitated. "I promise I won't spill coffee on you again. I'm bored. Maybe if you relax a little, you'll feel better. My life isn't exactly bright right now." I should have said no, but instead I said, "All right, come in." We smoked, drank, and watched 2 movies that wouldn't be released until next year. One was decent, the other terrible, and we made silly jokes about the bad one. I realized that when Deirdre wasn't acting spoiled or chasing after guys, she wasn't such a bad person after all. At some point during the night, Deirdre ended up curled against me. It felt nice, but when she started touching me, I grabbed her hand and said, "Stop." She looked up at me, her green eyes catching mine. "Why?" she asked, but I didn't know how to respond, so I stayed silent. "Stop. I don't get it. What's going on?" she pressed, climbing on top of me. Her hair seemed to move as if by its own will, though there was no fan in the room. "I shouldn't tell you this, but I will. I've put a spell on you. An Irish love spell. My dad used to say we descended from the gods, the Tuatha De Danann, and that I had magic." She leaned down to kiss me, her eyes glowing in the dark. "You're mine forever. You'll be with me until you die." The rest of the night became a blur of passion, and then nothingness. I woke up the next morning with her still beside me. When I got up to use the bathroom and returned, she was awake, watching me. "Do you wish you'd gone out last night?" she asked. "No, but you kind of freaked me out," I admitted. "How so?" "I didn't know I was with a witch." She thought for a moment, then laughed. "Did you really believe all that about the spell and the Tuatha De Danann? The floating hair, the glowing eyes?" "It was pretty convincing," I said, chuckling. "And being high didn't help." She laughed again. "I'm surprised you didn't see leprechauns or fairies. I've heard those stories since I was little. I was just messing with you." She got up and started dressing. Does that mean you think you really love me? Don't push it. I'm just surprised we ended up in bed together. She smiled and said, Next time, you'll have to come after me. I won't be chasing you again. Later that day, I got the call I'd been expecting from Lancaster. He summoned me to a bright room overlooking the marshes, once home to oyster beds that were long gone. I had no idea what would happen next, but I wasn't too worried. Sit, he said, pointing to a chair by the pool. I sat and he stared at me for a while before speaking. I know what happened, he said, but I don't know what it means. That makes two of us, I replied. It's definitely physical, but I can't stop thinking about her. I told her she's not my type, but that doesn't seem to matter. I'm not going to stop you from seeing her, Lancaster said. Honestly, I trust her with you more than anyone else. Just try not to hurt her, okay? I think you should talk to her about that. 2 years later, in early 2004, Orion had passed away from a sudden stroke. Deirdre and I had been married for 2 years. She'd changed me in ways I hadn't expected. Even though she wasn't my usual type, I couldn't get her out of my mind. I used to think I'd never be happy with just one woman, but that wasn't the case. We didn't need to be intimate every night, but rarely did more than 3 days go by without us being together. I still traveled a lot for work, but coming home was always something to celebrate. My life was different from what I'd imagined, but it was good. I had a wife, a job that felt more meaningful because it supported both of us, and I realized I wanted kids. I hoped for a couple of chubby, red-headed babies to complete our family, but so far, no luck. Lately, though, I'd felt something was off. I'd decided that when I got back home, we'd take a month off on a sunny island, swim in the ocean, enjoy fruity drinks, and spend our nights together. But while I was in Russia, I got a serious call from Deirdre's assistant. Mr. McCarthy, Miss Lancaster has been in an accident. What kind of accident? Is she hurt? She crashed into a power pole on I-295. When did this happen? The night before last? Why didn't anyone call me sooner? Was she driving? Why? There was silence on the other end. Why wasn't I called? Is she hurt? More silence. What's going on? Are these hard questions to answer? Please tell me, is she hurt badly? I pleaded, my heart pounding in my chest. We were told not to contact you. You were told not to contact me? Who gave that order? I'm afraid I did, said a familiar voice. It was Daniel Goldman, Deirdre's main assistant. Since Orion's death, I'd seen him frequently. Deirdre owned the company, but she relied on Daniel to run it. He was tough, no nonsense, but we'd always gotten along. You told them not to inform me that my wife was in an accident and hospitalized? Who do you think you are? She's my wife. I run Lancaster Oil on her behalf, and I'm responsible for her care as the main stockholder. I decided not to inform you. And why would you keep that from me? I can't share details, but I had my reasons. A doctor advised me to keep you away, and Deirdre herself said she didn't want to see you. That's not possible. It's true, Michael. She doesn't want you back. If you stay on your current project, you'll keep your pay. If you try to return, you'll lose everything. Your credit with Lancaster Oil, your income, you'll be stranded in Russia with no resources. I don't know why you're doing this, Daniel, but it's a huge mistake, one you'll regret. Don't try to return. Things may change, and you'll understand later. But if you attempt to see Deirdre, we will stop you. Good luck with that. Half an hour later, I discovered all my company credit was frozen. I might have borrowed money from friends, but they'd probably block that too. So I called in a favor from a government contact who owed me. An hour later, I was on a private plane flying over the Mediterranean, then the Atlantic, with a brief stop in Cuba. From there, a helicopter took me to a Norwegian cargo ship bound for Miami. After another quick flight, I landed in North Jacksonville, where a rental car awaited me. By 9 a.m., I called Goldman. "Where are you?" he asked, sounding uneasy. "Back in Jacksonville. I'm seeing her. I have a right to know what's happening." "Michael, just wait a few days. I'll explain everything then." "Fine, I'll meet you at the hospital." At 11 a.m., chaos erupted at the hospital as multiple people claiming to be me tried to enter Deirdre's room. At 11:20, a nurse wheeled a patient with an oxygen mask into her room, only to be intercepted by security. During the commotion, I quietly sat up, removed the mask, and pointed my gun at the nearest guard. "Everyone stay calm, and no one gets hurt. Stay away from my wife, Daniel." Daniel stood by Deirdre's bedside. Her face was wrapped in bandages, but her unmistakable red hair was visible. Our eyes met, and I saw shock, fear, and something more. "Deirdre, what's going on? Daniel said you didn't want to see me. Talk to me. If your face is hurt, it doesn't matter. I love you." Then I noticed the tall man holding her hand. He looked like a rock star with long hair and a diamond earring. I'd never seen him in person, but recognized him from photos. He was holding my wife's hand while I had to sneak in. "Goldman, get your hands off my wife." 3 guards closed in, and Daniel signaled them to approach. "Don't be foolish, Michael. If you pull that trigger, you'll end up in jail." "You might be right." I kneed the guard in front of me, dropping him instantly. Another guard swung at me, but I twisted, grabbed his wrist, and threw him onto a gurney, shoving it out the door. The last guard charged like a linebacker. I dodged, then hit him hard with the back of my gun, sending him sprawling. As the remaining guard rushed me, I feinted left, then ducked right, pressing my gun under Daniel's chin. The room froze. "Don't do it, Michael," Daniel warned, raising his hands to signal the others to back off. "If you all stay back, I won't do anything crazy like shoot Daniel," I said. "But keep pushing, and I might just push back." The room went still. "You won't keep me from my wife. I don't know why you're trying or how that jerk Gutman got in here." A voice behind me interrupted. "Maybe I can explain." I turned to see a tall, slim, well-dressed man standing in the doorway. He didn't look like a regular doctor, but everything about him screamed professionalism. "I'm Dr. Mayfair, your wife's psychiatrist, Mr. McCarthy," he said. "2 nights ago, she had an accident and hit a power pole. She sustained some facial cuts and a concussion. But the bigger issue is her memory. She has amnesia. She doesn't remember the last 3 years of her life." "3 years? So she doesn't remember me or our marriage?" "Correct. She doesn't remember you, your time together, or even her father's passing. But she remembers Gutman here as the person she loved before everything changed. When she woke up, she was very distressed until we found him and brought him to the hospital." I looked at Deirdre, holding Gutman's hand like it was her lifeline. "She doesn't remember me at all?" "She doesn't remember you, even from before the last 3 years. We showed her your picture and explained, but it upset her. She woke up in a world completely different from the one she remembers. I recommended giving her time to adjust before seeing you, as it could worsen her memory issues." "Could you please remove the gun from under my chin?" Daniel asked cautiously. "I knew you wouldn't stay away if I just told you to, so I thought keeping you in Eastern Europe would give us time to help her and prepare you for what happened. I underestimated your stubbornness. Even if you're mad, understand that I did this because the doctor said she needed space from you to heal." I kept the gun in place and turned back to Deirdre. "Is this true, Deirdre? You don't remember me, and thinking about me upsets you?" She looked at me with pleading eyes. "Yes, they told me we were married, showed me pictures, but it doesn't feel real. I don't remember you or why I married you. You don't even seem appealing to me. Please, just go." Her voice started to rise, and Dr. Mayfair intervened. "Her blood pressure is rising. We can't risk further stress. It's time to leave." I handed the gun to Daniel, letting the security guards lead me out. Outside, police officers were waiting, but Daniel waved them off. "Just a misunderstanding, gentlemen. No issue here." As the police left, Daniel said, "I'm keeping this," waving the gun. "But I know you have more. Leave now, or I'll have you arrested if you return to the hospital or the Lancaster estate. Your job at Lancaster Oil is over and your pay is stopped. Find another job." I shook his hand. "Thank you for not pressing charges. Please let me know if anything changes or if she remembers. You'll be the first to know." I walked out of the hospital, flanked by 3 security guards. Everything seemed to be against me, but I had one realization. I knew she was lying. Deirdre hadn't lost her memory. She was faking it. It should have been a relief, a sign that she might come back to me, but instead it made the situation even more painful. I had to accept that my life with her was over and learn to move on alone. June 4th, 2004. The sign above the 3-story building read, "Bailey, Devon, Martin, and Wilkes" in big golden letters. Rumor had it the letters were made of real gold. This law firm was one of Jacksonville's oldest and most successful, having represented Lancaster and his oil company for nearly 30 years. Mort Bailey, a close friend of Lancaster and Deirdre's godfather, was well aware of what I was stepping into. I'd received several emails and a friendly call from a woman at the firm inviting me to discuss Deirdre in a casual setting. I wasn't fooled. I knew this would be anything but casual, more like a sheep walking into a den of wolves. Before getting out of my Jeep Liberty, I made a few quick phone calls. Then I locked the car and stepped out. This part of Jacksonville was crowded with law offices, more than you'd expect in such a small area. The streets were filled with sharp-eyed lawyers, police, and a mix of drug users and dealers. Not the place to wander at night unless you knew what you were doing. I walked through the firm's front door and took a deep breath. The scent of money and law books filled the air. A woman with bright red hair and a sharp-looking dress greeted me with a smile. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you?" "I'm here to see Mr. Bailey or someone from his team. I'm Michael McCarthy." Her smile faltered for a moment. "Oh yes, Mr. McCarthy. They're expecting you in the conference room on the 3rd floor." She gestured to a tall man beside me. He was about 4 inches taller than me, dressed sharply, but with a gun barely concealed under his jacket. He didn't look like a lawyer. I'd seen men like him in rough places, but not in Jacksonville. "If you don't mind," he said, motioning for me to raise my arms. "What if I do mind?" I asked. "That would be unfortunate, sir. My job is to keep this building safe, and I can't let you go up until I check you for weapons." "Are you serious?" "Absolutely. There have been several incidents in the city where angry clients harmed lawyers or their staff. Mr. Bailey's team deals with very emotional cases, so everyone gets checked." I raised my arms, and he patted me down, checking my belongings before handing them back. I turned around to let him check my back, then followed him to an elevator with polished brass doors. The ride took about 10 seconds. We stepped out into a hallway lined with pictures of serene countryside scenes. The calm atmosphere seemed designed to diffuse any lingering anger. My guide stopped at a door, and I walked through. The room was long, dominated by a large oval table surrounded by 26 chairs. The table gleamed under the light, almost blinding me with its reflection. But what made me pause was the 15 people already seated. At one end of the table sat Mort Bailey, with Billy Wilkes on his right and Deirdre on his left. Deirdre stared down at the table, avoiding eye contact. Bailey pointed to the seat across from him. I pulled out the chair and sat down. "I feel like Custer at the Little Bighorn right now," I joked. Bailey didn't smile. "I appreciate the attempt to lighten the mood, Mr. McCarthy, but this is a serious meeting. I hoped meeting here, away from official settings, would allow us to discuss this openly and solve the problem together. No notes, just honest conversation." He glanced at Deirdre, and they seemed to exchange a silent message. She looked at him, then at me, trying to act indifferent, but there was something more behind her look before she glanced back down. "Exactly, Mr. McCarthy. Honesty is key in resolving tough issues," Bailey continued. "Well, I'm here. Let's discuss it then. Before we start, Mr. Harper Stevens, the tall man who checked me earlier, mentioned you have a few devices with you, a digital recorder and a phone that can record as well. To ensure an open discussion, I'd like you to hand those over to our secretary during the meeting." "They're not recording anything, and you can see that. I didn't think we'd be discussing anything illegal today. My devices stay with me or I leave. Your choice." Bailey sighed. "That's not the answer we were hoping for, but since you say we're not discussing anything illegal, let's move on. You know your wife wants to end your marriage, right?" I took a deep breath. "She's mentioned being unhappy a few times, but that doesn't mean she wants a divorce." Deirdre glanced up at me briefly before looking down again. Bailey held her hand. "She asked for a divorce 2 months ago, then again a month ago, and just last week. I don't know how she could be more clear." When Deirdre looked up again, I met her gaze, still holding onto the hope that she felt something for me. Her face, still showing signs from the car accident, looked pained. "Deirdre?" Her voice trembled, but she spoke with determination. "No, Michael, whether you believe it or not, I never fell in love with you. I didn't marry you. I didn't spend 2 years as your wife." "You know you did," I replied. "It doesn't matter if you remember or not. It's true." "No," she said, her voice shaking. "I know what people say. I've seen the wedding pictures, but none of it feels real. I never met you. I never fell in love with you. I didn't live with you for 2 years. To me, none of that happened. Not remembering doesn't change what actually happened. It doesn't erase our marriage." "It changes love," she countered. "I don't know you. I never loved you. When you touch me, it feels like a stranger is touching me. How can you expect me to feel close to someone I don't even know? This feels like a bad dream I can't escape. All I want is for you to go away so I can return to my real life." "It's simple, Mr. McCarthy," said Wilkes, another partner, in a smooth voice. "You're not married now, at least not in her reality. Legally, maybe, but emotionally, there's no marriage." "I thought lawyers believed in the law." Bailey shook his head, a faint smile on his lips. "Lawyers believe in their clients. The law is just a tool we use to help them. If you really cared about your client, you'd help her agree to my request for marriage counseling while she sees the best doctors to help her remember." "That's your idea of what's best for Miss Lancaster," Bailey replied. "She believes her best choice is to end this non-marriage and return to her old life." He leaned forward, fingers pressed together. "Truthfully, Mr. McCarthy, this meeting is a sign of respect for you. I understand your feelings. If I were in your shoes, about to lose a wife who looks like the woman I married but seems so different, I'd fight just as hard. But the hard truth is, you have no control here. Florida is a no-fault state. If Miss Lancaster wants a divorce, she will get one. You can resist, but you will lose." "I'll still fight it." "Why?" "Because I love her. Because she's my wife. Because forgetting is tricky, and she might get her memories back after marrying someone else. That would be terrible. I don't like losing. Call me stubborn, but I want to keep what's mine. No matter how people talk about Florida's no-fault laws, they only work that way if you let them. If I fight back and keep putting up barriers, I can delay things. The longer I delay, the more chances I have of her getting her memories back." Bailey handed a folder to the gray-haired lawyer sitting next to Deirdre, who brought it over to me. "This is Dr. Herbert Mayfair's report. He's the psychiatrist who's been treating Deirdre since the accident." "I've read it," I said. "Read it again, just for me," Bailey insisted. "Dr. Mayfair is a well-respected psychiatrist with 15 years of experience in Jacksonville." I opened the folder and skimmed the pages. Near the end, Dr. Mayfair's conclusion caught my eye. Asterisk. "My study, along with medical notes from the accident until now, leads me to believe with almost complete certainty that Miss Lancaster has a serious brain injury that could explain her memory loss for the last 3 years. After the car accident on March 17th, she was taken to St. Vincent's with brain swelling from hitting the front windshield. The swelling and bleeding in her brain could have caused enough damage to erase parts of her memory, even though there's no sign of ongoing damage. The injury itself could have led to memory loss that persists even after the physical healing. There's also a possibility that emotional factors worsened the physical injury. Based on what Miss Lancaster remembers and what others have shared, she had no significant relationship with Mr. McCarthy before the past 3 years and reportedly resisted the marriage, feeling pressured by her father. If that's true, she may not want to remember a marriage she was pushed into. In summary, it's my expert opinion that trying to restore her lost memories is unlikely to succeed and could harm her mental health. Bailey leaned back. "As you can see, it's improbable that your wife will regain her memories. Perhaps it's better this way. Memory loss is a complicated issue. Are you really willing to risk your wife's happiness on something Dr. Mayfair says is very unlikely?" I could have argued about the claim that Deirdre was unhappy in our marriage, but I wanted to keep the meeting moving. I picked up my phone and pressed a number. As everyone at the table watched, I said into the phone, "It's time. Please come up." Bailey looked puzzled. "What's going on, McCarthy?" "You never said I had to come here alone," I replied. "I want someone with me." Bailey hesitated, then instructed his bodyguard, "Go downstairs and meet whoever it is. Send him up, but know it's a waste of time. No one will believe he's a threat, and if you touch him, you'll be facing a lawsuit." Bailey made a call, listened for a moment, and then said, "Send him up. He doesn't need an escort." He then dismissed the bodyguard. A few moments later, a tall man with short, dark hair walked in. His sharp features and intense gaze gave him a military air, like someone straight out of a World War I poster. He didn't need an introduction. His presence spoke for itself. He sat down next to me. "Dr. Teller, Mr. Bailey." "Gentlemen?" Teller greeted them with a nod. Bailey looked wary. "What brings you here today, Dr. Teller? This isn't a hearing, just a discussion between Mr. McCarthy and our staff about his marriage to Miss Lancaster." Teller glanced at me, then back at Bailey. I'm not sure why you need so many lawyers for a simple talk, but Mr. McCarthy asked me to be here in case there were questions about Mrs. McCarthy's mental health. And by the way, I don't understand why you call her Miss Lancaster. Legally, she's still married to Mr. McCarthy. It's a matter of choice, Dr. Teller. In her mind, Miss Lancaster feels like a single woman again. The legal steps are just a formality, Bailey said. We appreciate your opinion, but we've seen Dr. Mayfair's report. We believe a judge will agree that Miss Lancaster shouldn't be trapped in a marriage she doesn't recognize as real. Teller rubbed his chin thoughtfully. You know about my report from my conversation with Mrs. McCarthy? I found no evidence of ongoing trauma or brain damage that would cause memory loss. The term amnesia is often used broadly, but it doesn't mean much without specific context. I reviewed her hospital records and brain scans. There was some swelling, as expected after such an accident, but nothing that would lead to selective memory loss. There's also no sign of ongoing issues. He picked up Dr. Mayfair's report and flipped through it. The idea that her memory loss is psychological is easy to suggest, but hard to prove. It's a convenient theory when there's no concrete evidence to support the claim of amnesia. That's just your opinion, Doctor, Wilkes replied smoothly. And while you're a respected psychiatrist, everyone has their own views. Teller leaned closer to me and whispered, There's a reason people say, first, let's kill all the lawyers. Wilkes has a reputation for shaking things up with witnesses, and today he has more leeway than usual. Teller turned to him and said, You're right, an opinion is just that, not a fact. But after speaking with many suspects in serious cases, I'm convinced that Mrs. McCarthy is not telling the truth. He fixed his gaze on Deirdre until she met his eyes. Normally composed, she now showed a hint of something I rarely saw, fear or at least doubt. Usually I wouldn't say more, Teller continued. But since we're having an open discussion and strong opinions have been shared, I must tell you, Mrs. McCarthy, that I believe you're lying about your amnesia. I believe you do remember your husband. Before Wilkes could respond, Teller added, Even if we can't be completely sure, there's a way to test this. A lie detector. No, Bailey interjected, grabbing Deirdre's hand. Miss Lancaster has every right to refuse a polygraph test, Doctor. You know they aren't admissible in court and are unreliable in emotionally charged situations. They're not even that helpful in proving the truth. Teller responded, But many people take them to show they're not hiding anything. If Mrs. McCarthy took the test, it would at least support her claim and show she's not afraid of the truth. Why not take a lie detector test, Deirdre? I asked. She looked at me, as if she felt pulled in two directions. What do you have to lose? Like Bailey said, if you want a divorce, you'll probably get it. But if I believed your story, I might be willing to let it go. There will be no lie detector tests, Bailey stated firmly. Deirdre looked at me with what seemed like genuine sorrow. Why can't you trust me? Let me go so we can both move on. I can't trust you because you've lied too many times, I replied. Mr. McCarthy, Wilkes cut in, this meeting was partly arranged to reach a fair agreement. If we can't, it might cost you a lot more in legal fees. Let's not go there. Wilkes was clearly enjoying playing the bad cop. I stood up, pushing my chair back, and Teller followed suit. Gentlemen, it's been nice. See you in court. The real court. Bailey waved for me to sit down. Mr. McCarthy, let's stay calm. We won't help anyone by letting emotions take over. Please, everyone, sit down. We might have to discuss sensitive matters, but it's clear we all want to save money and avoid hurt feelings by settling this today. Bailey managed to calm the room, but I knew they needed my cooperation more than I needed theirs. I had the upper hand. Now, Mr. McCarthy, Bailey continued, while my partner might have been a bit blunt, there's no need to talk about lying. Regardless of who may have lied, it won't change the outcome of a divorce case. That's where you're wrong, I said. My wife has lied about important things, things that matter. If you want to know why I'm not cooperating, it's because I want to expose those lies. Mr. McCarthy, Bailey responded, no matter how satisfying it might be to share personal details from your marriage, it won't help anyone. It helps keep me here. You asked me to come, and the longer I stay, the more I think you want something from me. Let's put everything on the table. Bailey whispered something to Wilkes, then nodded. All right, Mr. McCarthy, we'll let you speak freely. If bringing these issues to light might help everyone, let's do it. I pressed a button on my phone and leaned back, watching Deirdre. She looked at Bailey, then Wilkes, then at the other lawyers, but never at me. Not once. 5 minutes later, Earl Wilson walked in. He was dressed in smart, casual attire, gray pants, shiny black shoes, and a white shirt without a tie. He sat next to me, placing his briefcase on the table. "This is Mr. Earl Wilson from Wilson Investigations," I said. "I could tell you about his skills, but I think you already know him or have worked against him. When I returned to the country and heard about Deirdre's accident, I was curious. She's strong-willed and bold, but I never thought of her as a careless driver. Her father taught her to drive safely with the best instructors, not because he was worried about her having fun, but because of the risks that come with having that much money. During our time together, she drove a lot, and I can honestly say she drove better than I did, and I'm not bad." As I spoke, Deirdre lifted her eyes and stared at me, realizing that I knew the truth. "I hired Mr. Wilson to investigate the accident and Deirdre's actions before and after. I'll let him explain." Wilson quickly opened his briefcase, laying out papers and photos. I reviewed the accident report and the pictures of the damage and injuries. These documents were hard to find. Some were even reported missing, but I managed to locate them and make copies. If you want to see them, I have them here. He began, "The accident report states that Mrs. McCarthy was driving alone when she crashed on Interstate 95 as it enters Jacksonville from St. Augustine. The report claims she lost control at high speed and hit a power pole." Wilson paused, glancing at Bailey and Wilkes, who looked increasingly uneasy. "But the pictures tell a different story. The damage is mostly on the right front of the car, not the driver's side. If she had hit the pole head-on, the damage would be on the driver's side. It appears the driver tried to turn left to avoid the impact. Most of the blood and crash evidence is on the right side, where the passenger sits." Wilson leaned forward, his voice steady. "I consulted 2 accident experts and they both agree. Mrs. McCarthy couldn't have sustained her injuries while driving. She must have been in the passenger seat." Bailey shot back, "You found 2 low-level experts. There are plenty of explanations for how the driver could have been injured like that. And what does this have to do with our discussion?" I signaled Wilson to continue. As he spoke, I glanced at Deirdre and saw the fear in her eyes, like an animal trapped with no escape. I didn't say it out loud, but I knew she understood what I was thinking. Asterisk. You should have told the truth. Wilson continued, "Given the evidence, it's clear there were 2 people in the car, but the police report doesn't mention a second person. I spoke to a police communications officer who initially reported 2 people in the accident, but later that detail disappeared. Mrs. McCarthy was taken to Baptist Medical Center, but no other crash victim was recorded around that time." Wilson paused, then added, "However, I discovered that Julian Gutman was admitted to University Medical Center with injuries consistent with those caused by an airbag, broken ribs, facial cuts, the kind of injuries a driver might sustain." He looked directly at Bailey and Wilkes, unable to hide his smile. "Normally, when someone is injured in an accident, there's a police report, but I couldn't find one for Gutman. The only explanation is that someone with a lot of money and connections made sure those reports never surfaced, likely to avoid trouble for everyone involved." Wilson then shared another set of documents. "I also looked into their activities that night. Mrs. McCarthy's security team has GPS trackers on all her cars, and I managed to access those records. They show that she and Gutman spent time at a lounge called Neptune's Cave on St. Augustine Beach. Witnesses saw them being very close for several hours and then leaving together, both quite drunk. They were reportedly heading back to Jacksonville, where Mr. Gutman was living in a condo paid for by Mrs. McCarthy." Bailey, his voice tense, finally interrupted. "That's enough. We've already discussed that none of what you've said can be proven, and it doesn't change the outcome of the divorce." "Gutman's involvement doesn't change anything legally," Wilkes said, holding Deirdre's hand. "Cheating isn't a factor anymore, especially with no kids or alimony involved. What matters is her wish for a divorce. So despite everything you've brought up, our focus should be on ending your marriage smoothly." "I guess you didn't hear me when I said I don't want a divorce," I responded. And I'll fight to stop my wife from being with the guy who got her pregnant when she was underage and then ran away when her father paid him off. Even if I didn't love her, I'd fight just to annoy them both. Is it worth spending all that money just to annoy your ex-wife? Wilkes asked. Money isn't an issue for me, I replied. Wilkes gave me a knowing look. So, you're planning to take money from your ex-wife because she's rich? After just 2 years of marriage, most of which you spent apart? No. I just want what I deserve if Deirdre wants this divorce. What do you think you deserve? Wilkes asked, feigning surprise. Yes, Mr. Wilkes and Mr. Bailey, I mean what I deserve. That's why we're here today. We can keep pretending, but I know what's really going on. We could talk in circles, but why not get to the point? Bailey leaned forward. Why go through all this? What's your real goal? I wanted to see if Deirdre could look me in the eye to see if any part of the real Deirdre was still there. Now I have my answer. Both Teller and Wilson looked at me with curiosity, still unsure of my intentions. I feel like I walked into a movie halfway through, Wilson said. I thought I knew the whole story. Do you mind? I asked Bailey. He shrugged. This meeting isn't really about Deirdre wanting a divorce or her supposed memory loss. I always knew the amnesia was fake. I would have given her a divorce at any time, but right now she wouldn't choose to leave me. How could you know that? Deirdre asked, finally meeting my gaze, revealing a glimpse of the woman I once knew. It was simple, Deirdre. When I returned, you acted shocked, like you didn't know me. You knew my face because others would have shown you my picture, but you claimed never to have seen me in person. Your father told me you had a crush on me in your early teens. I might not have noticed you then, but you remembered me. Even if you didn't remember our marriage, you wouldn't forget someone who was your first crush. When you pretended to forget me entirely, I knew the memory loss wasn't real. After that, it was just a matter of investigating and gathering evidence. I turned back to the legal team. What I didn't understand at first was why Deirdre would pretend to forget me. Like you said, gentlemen, I couldn't stop her from divorcing me if she truly wanted to. And honestly, Deirdre, once I found out you were with that scumbag Gutman, I would have let you go. I stepped behind Deirdre and she tensed, but didn't move. The younger lawyer with silver hair started to rise, but Bailey signaled him to stay seated. It's okay, Matt, Bailey said. I placed my hands on Deirdre's shoulders, squeezing gently. When I realized Gutman was the one you were cheating with, everything made sense. I understood why you fabricated the amnesia story. It was clever, but it won't work. Still, it was smart. I knew it had to be your idea. Gutman isn't bright enough to come up with something like this. I usually enjoy those murder mysteries where the detective explains everything, Wilson said, but honestly, I'm still confused. I could tell some of Bailey's team shared Wilson's confusion. My plan of standing behind Deirdre and placing my hands on her shoulders wasn't going as expected. Feeling the warmth of her skin reminded me of when we were close, and it was hard to resist touching her more. Memories of our time together flooded back, making it difficult to let go, even though I knew what she had done. You don't have all the information, Wilson, I said. The most important part is that Mr. Lancaster wanted to ensure our marriage had a solid chance, so he set certain rules. Both Deirdre and I agreed to and signed those rules. To put it simply, for every year we stayed married, I would receive $1 million. After the 10th year, we could divorce or stay together, but the money would still go into an account for me. If Deirdre cheated on me, I'd automatically get $10 million. If we divorced before the 10th year for any reason other than my cheating, I'd still get the money. The room fell silent when I mentioned the $10 million divorce clause. That kind of news could stop anyone in their tracks, except maybe in Hollywood or the Hamptons. This hefty penalty was meant to protect his daughter from gold diggers, but it didn't scare Deirdre. She'd pay it without a second thought if it meant happiness with Gutman. Deirdre, spoiled as ever, wouldn't hesitate, but Julian Gutman? He grew up working class. $1 million would be a lot to him, let alone $10 million. The thought of me walking away with that kind of money, which he probably believed should have been his, must have infuriated him. This whole thing was a setup to keep me from getting the money Lancaster intended for me. Deirdre had to break her father's will to keep her selfish boyfriend happy. The idea of what else she might have done for him made me sick. I leaned in, my lips near her ear. What hurts the most is that you did all this for him." Without moving, she whispered, "Let go of me, Michael. Just let go." I released my grip and stepped back, feeling the tension rise as Matt, or whatever his name was, seemed ready to intervene. I had to step back, show I meant no harm. Bailey wasn't too upset. They were here to learn what I knew. Wilson, lounging comfortably, said, "Lancaster was a devout Catholic like you, Mr. Bailey. The McCarthys were married in a Catholic church, so divorce isn't encouraged. But annulments, they happen." If Mrs. McCarthy went to the bishop with her sad story, a brief, childless marriage and a memory loss that erased years, he might listen. Bailey smiled, which I didn't like. He continued, "Even if you think we'd do something wrong, there's still the civil courts. Mr. McCarthy could take the fight there where church rules don't matter." I saw Bailey's confidence. He wasn't used to losing. I doubted he'd easily give me what Lancaster wanted from me if Gutman came back into Deirdre's life. "Why do I feel like you're not worried about what I might do?" I asked. Wilkes replied, "You're sharp. We wanted to see what you knew and what you might do next. Now we can have a real talk." He dismissed the others and leaned in. "Let's get to the point. You think your wife is faking memory loss after a car crash? You've got a doctor who agrees, but we believe she genuinely got hurt. You can't prove much about the accident, though you can show she was seeing Mr. Gutman while married to you. But legally, so what? Gutman is legal, and people fall in and out of love. Deirdre isn't looking to get back with you. She'll do everything she can to ensure you don't get the $10 million from your marriage agreement." Bailey rubbed his bald head and asked, "Does that cover everything?" "Almost," I replied. "But you missed the most important point. I'm getting that $10 million no matter what tricks you try. You will lose." Bailey stepped closer, sizing me up. For a man in his 60s, he was in decent shape. He signaled to an older woman with dark hair who handed him a paper. "Thank you, Marge," he said, and I noticed a hint of charm between them. He handed me the document. "This is an agreement. Sign it and you'll forfeit any claim to the $10 million in exchange for $250,000 today. Miss Lancaster will get a quick, uncontested divorce, and you both can move on." I smiled. "You must think I'm an idiot. Why would I do that?" "Because you don't have a choice," Bailey replied. He pointed around the room. "You joked about feeling like General Custer at Little Bighorn, outnumbered, outmatched. You were right. You might feel morally justified, but court battles are about power, not righteousness. Miss Lancaster is worth $150 million. You've got $35,000 left after paying your doctor and investigator. We have 50 lawyers working on her case. You have none. We've blocked your access to her money, and any support a judge might grant you is frozen until this case is over, which could take years." He leaned in. "We'll drag this out, argue for an annulment based on cruelty and domestic abuse, and complicate the divorce with endless legal maneuvers. You'll run out of money for experts and detectives, and eventually you'll lose. The $10 million, your marriage, your lawyer, maybe even your freedom." I couldn't stay still. I circled Bailey and turned Deirdre's chair to face me. "I guess I never really knew you, Deirdre. I thought you'd fight hard for Gutman, but I didn't expect you to hurt me just to give him a $10 million gift. Your father would be heartbroken to see how far you've fallen." "Just sign the papers, Michael. We're done. Take the $250,000 and leave me alone," she said coldly. Wilkes came up behind me. "Michael, you've been misled by courtroom dramas. Real courtrooms are battlefields, not places where truth simply prevails. We'll overwhelm you with motions, legal papers, and lawyer after lawyer. You don't know the law well enough to stand a chance. We'll crush you." Bailey stood behind Deirdre, hands on her shoulders, and added, "And we won't play fair. This is a dirty fight." Deirdre revealed how you hurt her the first night her father entrusted her to you. You drugged her, and when she resisted, you hit her. Her friends tried to help, but you beat them too. 4 men attempted to stop you, but you overpowered them. What chance did a small girl have? After that, you controlled her by threatening to tell her father she had been unfaithful. She admitted to being a bit wild, but never wanted to hurt her father with such lies. Deirdre looked at me, regal with her bright red hair. "Why did you marry someone so awful, Deirdre? Why stay with me for 2 years if I was that bad?" She stood tall. "Because you're violent, Michael. After my father sent Julian away, you threatened to hurt him unless I married you and let you take over my father's business. The weight of her accusations hit me hard. Wilkes added, "Sign the papers, Michael. The statute of limitations on those charges hasn't expired. This could get much worse. You've already lost your wife. Take the $250,000 and walk away, or risk destroying your life." Teller chimed in. "This meeting is meant to rattle you, like a civilian version of military shock and awe. It's designed to overwhelm you." Wilson added, "I'm not a lawyer, but I know that wills and prenuptial agreements, especially ones made by a man like Lancaster, are hard to break. But lawyers can go to jail for trying. Be careful." Bailey grinned, as if the idea of jail was amusing. "Listen to me, Michael. Not signing could be your biggest mistake." I smiled, confusing everyone. Wilkes and Bailey exchanged uneasy glances, while Deirdre tensed, sensing something was about to happen. "Mr. Bailey, Mr. Wilkes," I said, "you're right. My friends aren't lawyers, and I don't have one either. But I do have someone helping me, pro bono. He's a good lawyer, and he knows you. Let me call him." I dialed, and within 30 seconds, phones started ringing around the room. Bailey and Wilkes were away from their chairs when their staff reported, "Mr. Bailey, Mr. Wilkes, there are police downstairs. They've arrested Mr. Stevens and are coming up." Bailey shook his head, dismissing it. "I don't know what game you're playing, McCarthy, but you're playing with fire. I'll deal with this so-called lawyer and make him regret it." Just then, footsteps echoed down the hall. The door opened, and deputies from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office entered, followed by Mr. Harper Stevens in handcuffs. Lastly, a short, unassuming man in civilian clothes quietly slipped in, unnoticed by most, as everyone focused on the deputies. As the officers entered, most of the staff watched them, but Bailey, Wilkes, and the real lawyers focused on the short man who had just walked in. He didn't look intimidating. His clothes were nice but tight around his belly, and his dull brown hair contrasted with a thick black stubble, giving him the look of someone who'd been on a bender. His name was William Maitland, the second in command at the state attorney's office, and he was my secret weapon. "Maitland?" Bailey shouted in surprise. "What's going on here?" "Hello, Mort." "Wilkes, I could ask you the same," Maitland replied with a smirk. "Never seen so many lawyers in one room except at a bar meeting with free drinks. Barely enough people here to bother with arrests, but I had to leave officers downstairs to keep them from sneaking off." "This isn't a game, Maitland," Bailey said, his voice tight. "You're right, Mort, this is a raid," Maitland said, smiling as if he had a secret. Bailey grabbed the phone. "Give me your boss's number, Maitland. If you're still employed tomorrow, I'll be shocked." He dialed the number and put it on speaker. "Dallas, this is Mort Bailey. Do you know what Maitland is doing in my office?" "I know why he's there," came the response. "He got some troubling news about your firm. He's there to clear it up." "He broke into my office with armed police during a crucial meeting." "Maitland wouldn't be there without a good reason, Mort. Please work with him and he'll help you. Let's discuss this further when I'm back in town." The call ended with a loud click. Maitland leaned in. "Mort, I think your good friend just betrayed you, and I'm here to take full advantage of it." Bailey and Wilkes sank back into their seats, clearly rattled. Bailey shot back. "You may have power now, Maitland, but it won't last. I'll file misconduct charges against you. You'll regret this." "Maybe, but let's deal with the urgent matter first," Maitland replied, sitting down. He pointed at me. "Mr. McCarthy came to my office with serious charges. Felony fraud, influencing perjury, filing false documents. Mr. McCarthy, play the recording." I couldn't help but grin as I pressed play. Deirdre's voice filled the room, revealing the scheme to fake memory loss, a paid-off doctor, and the cover-up of the accident. Wilkes and Bailey's faces fell as the recording played, and I savored the moment. Deirdre's voice was shaky. "I feel terrible about this. All of it is just to stop Michael from getting his $10 million. I begged Julian to let it go. We don't need it, but he won't. I think he hates Michael more than he wants the money. He just wants to hurt him. And all these lies we're spreading, accusing Michael of things he never did, it's awful. I can't do this anymore, but Julian insists it won't go to court. It's just to scare Michael into taking the $250,000 and leaving." I turned off the recorder. "That was your plan, Mort," Maitland said. "It could have worked, but Michael didn't just go away." Bailey glared at the recorder as if it were a ticking bomb. "Maitland, you're basing this on an illegal recording?" That won't hold up in court? Maitland smiled. Maybe. But remember the N.C. Arano case from 1985? When someone's breaking the law, they lose their right to privacy. And this recording? It might just lead us to evidence that asterisk can asterisk be used in court. He pulled out his phone. Bring in the doctor and the boyfriend. Bailey and Wilkes exchanged worried glances, realizing the gravity of the situation. Deirdre looked uneasy, clearly not expecting it to go this far. The door opened, and in walked Dr. Mayfair, looking disheveled in a wrinkled suit, followed by Julian Gutman, who sported casual board shorts and a t-shirt that read, "Teachers can conjugate all night." He swaggered in, confidently took a seat beside Deirdre, and kissed her deeply on the lips, making it clear she was now his. Maitland addressed the room. "Good afternoon, Dr. Mayfair. Rough day?" Mayfair, usually polished and charismatic, looked like a shadow of his former self, visibly nervous and unable to meet Maitland's eyes. "Mr. Bailey, Mr. Wilkes, I'm sorry," Mayfair stammered. "I had no choice. They said I'd go to prison. I had to talk." Bailey snapped back. "We both know you wrote a truthful report without any outside influence or payment. Whatever Maitland pressured you into, it won't stand." Maitland smirked. "You lie so well, Mort. Sometimes I wonder if you even believe your own words. But let's cut the games. This is just getting started. You have one illegal tape and a coerced confession. You've got nothing," Bailey sneered. Maitland remained calm. "I disagree. You're a civil lawyer, Bailey. You've never dealt with criminal law. From where I'm standing, taking you down won't be hard. We'll use the tape to guide witnesses, and Dr. Mayfair's signed paper gives us the right to search your office, review your files, check your calls, and question everyone involved." Bailey, regaining his confidence, stood up. "If that's all you've got, Maitland, take your police and go. Uncuff Mr. Stevens." Maitland turned to a nearby officer. "Stu, if Mr. Bailey doesn't sit down, cuff him." Bailey reluctantly sat. Maitland then approached Matt Henry, one of the lawyers. "Mr. Henry, let's take a walk." They moved to the far side of the room, still within earshot. "Matt, I know the lawyers in this area, even the civil ones. You're smart, hardworking, and a good lawyer. That's why Wilkes hired you. But I'm here to save you from a big problem, not to hurt you. I don't know how much you know about this scheme to cheat McCarthy out of $10 million, but I believe you're key to this case. If you come forward as a whistleblower, you'll protect your reputation and face no charges." Henry didn't look back at his bosses. "I appreciate the offer, but I believe the case against Bailey and Wilkes is nonsense. I can't help you." Maitland sighed, running his fingers through his thinning hair. "Loyalty is important, Matt, but you need to think carefully. Bailey and Wilkes might act tough now, but once the evidence comes out, they'll turn on each other. They're in their 60s. They can survive a few years in prison and still retire comfortably. Deirdre Lancaster might avoid jail altogether and still have her $150 million. But you? You're young, just starting out. Legal fees will drain you, and they'll likely pin the blame on you. You'll be disbarred, and no serious firm will hire someone convicted of fraud." Maitland stepped back, studying Henry. "You're a good-looking young man, Matt," he said with a laugh, seeing Henry's startled reaction. "Relax. I'm not suggesting anything inappropriate, just saying you've got a lot going for you. Don't throw it all away. I assume you like women and want a family someday. If you lose your license and end up in prison, that dream disappears. Staying loyal to your bosses means throwing away your future for men who won't care about you once this is over." Maitland placed a hand on Henry's shoulder, emphasizing his point. "Think carefully, Matt. This decision will change your life." Henry took a step back, shaking his head as if clearing a fog. "Maitland, you're good at what you do, but you're wasting your time on me. I know nothing about fraud or stealing $10 million. He turned away and returned to his seat. Maitland walked back to Bailey. "Whatever you're paying him, Mort, it's not enough. The same offer goes for everyone here. Come forward now and you'll walk away with no charges, but wait too long and the offer's gone." I observed the room, noticing the tension as everyone weighed their options. No one spoke up, but it felt like it was only a matter of time before someone cracked. Gutman, who had been holding Deirdre's hand tightly, looked worried now, thinking about the possibility of prison despite Deirdre's $150 million. When he caught my eye, I blew him a kiss, which only Deirdre's grip kept him from reacting to. Maitland seemed to have made up his mind. "Okay, Mort," he said, signaling to the officer. "If you're not willing to work out a deal, let's move on. Turn around and put your hands behind you. Cuff him and then do the same for Wilkes." Bailey, incredulous, finally turned and offered his hands for cuffing. "You're a jerk, Maitland," he spat. "You always have been." Maitland looked at him, then at me, before finally saying, "You've let me down, Mort. I thought you'd be begging for mercy, but you're too stubborn." He ordered everyone else to wait downstairs. "We may still need to arrest some people," he added, sending most of the officers away. Before things could escalate further, Harper Stevens, hands cuffed, asked, "Mr. Bailey, can I kick this guy's ass? These SAS guys think they're tough, but they're all talk." Grove, the big officer, looked at Maitland. "I offered to help you, Mr. Maitland, but I will take him down if you don't stop him." Maitland, keeping control of the situation, asked, "Bailey, can you call off your man?" "Why should I help you, Maitland?" Bailey replied coldly. "You're a loose cannon with too much power. I have no idea what you're doing here," Bailey snapped. "You'll understand soon," Maitland replied calmly. "If these two start fighting, someone will get hurt. If your man hurts mine, I'll have to arrest him for assault or worse, and you'll face a lawsuit. And if my guy hurts yours, he could be charged with manslaughter." The two men glared at each other until Harper Stevens suggested a dangerous compromise. "Take me down the back stairs. If one of us accidentally trips, it's over. No head hits, nothing intentional." The two men left, and everyone strained to hear what might happen outside, but the silence was unnerving. Bailey turned back to Maitland. "What's happening here? This is a bluff, and it's going to cost you your career." Maitland looked at me. "McCarthy, don't do this. I know why you want to, but she's not worth it." He didn't understand. Maitland was smart, but he'd never loved Deirdre Lancaster, and he couldn't grasp my determination. "You two," Maitland said, pointing at Bailey and Wilkes, "are the luckiest men I know. You might avoid jail and just lose your jobs and reputations, all because McCarthy still loves his wife." Deirdre glared at me, while Gutman smirked. "So this is just a bluff?" Bailey asked. "Not quite," Maitland replied. "We have Dr. Fairfax's statement and court orders to prevent any document destruction while we build our case. Some of your staff will testify against you. Convictions aren't the hard part." He then turned to me. "You're the problem, Mr. McCarthy," he said, with a mix of regret and determination in his eyes. "Why couldn't you just report this firm's wrongdoing and let the law handle it? You could have sent them to jail, gotten back at your unfaithful wife, and walked away with a lot of money." Maitland showed the tape recorder to everyone. "This tape is just a copy. McCarthy won't give us the original, which means any good lawyer could challenge its authenticity. It might even invalidate Dr. Fairfax's testimony." He held up a piece of paper. "We also found an email McCarthy sent to a friend a month ago. It reads, 'Griff, I wish I were with you in China right now. My life is terrible. I know Deirdre is cheating on me and faking memory problems. Sometimes I want to hurt her or her lover, but I think our marriage was doomed from the start. Maybe it's my fault. I saved her from those guys who drugged her that night, took her to a motel, and watched over her. But I've never told anyone that I couldn't stop looking at her as she lay there. I thought I didn't like thin girls, but I was drawn to her. I started to touch her, and she responded. In short, I slept with her." The room fell silent as Maitland's words hung in the air, the gravity of the situation becoming clear. I don't think she fully understood what was happening. I cleaned her up, and when she woke up, I pretended nothing had happened. I don't know if she ever believed me, but the truth is, I forced myself on her. It was wrong, no matter how you look at it. Now we're married, and I love her, but she's cheating on me. I wonder if a marriage built on lies and hurt can ever end well." Maitland glanced at the paper, shook his head, and tossed it on the table. "I don't know if this email is true. Either McCarthy is guilty or he's trying to make himself look bad." Bailey jumped up. "Your target is a liar and a criminal, and you're using him to take us down? Do you understand how absurd that sounds?" "Not absurd, sad," Maitland replied, looking between me and Deirdre. "When McCarthy came to me, he shared his plan. He wanted to make his wife and her lawyers nervous, hoping they'd hand over his $10 million, but he didn't want to go all the way. That's why he wouldn't give us the original tape and instead sent the email. Normally, I'd catch him as a tricky witness and go after you, Bailey. But he played the game well. Even if the court doesn't allow the wiretap, its existence will loom over the trial. The news will spread, and defense lawyers will pounce on the illegal recording. Maitland paused, considering the weight of the situation. The rape isn't directly linked to this case, but with Mrs. McCarthy ready to testify that her husband assaulted her, the entire marriage and prenup are in question. Women's rights groups will go wild, and the governor will be forced to appoint a special prosecutor. Even if I don't want to, I might have to charge McCarthy to protect myself. He signaled for coffee, and as the secretary left, he continued, I don't want to send an innocent man to jail even if he walks out with $10 million. But I also don't want you all, he gestured at Bailey, Wilkes, and their team, to get away with cheating, stealing $10 million, lying under oath, bribery, and more. Maitland turned to Bailey. If McCarthy signs papers giving up his claim to the $10 million and agrees to a divorce, will you drop the assault and other charges? Bailey responded, Those charges will disappear. He can leave with $250,000 as Miss Lancaster has already agreed. Maitland then faced Deirdre. You said your husband raped you, and he's confessed. Will you let it go once he signs the papers? Or will you unleash women's rights groups on him? Deirdre shook her head, and Bailey answered for her. She'll let him walk away. She doesn't want to relive those painful memories. The secretary returned with the coffee, and Maitland downed it quickly before continuing to pace the room, deep in thought. I've done things in this job I didn't want to do, things I hated, but I did them because it was the right thing to do. Some people think I'm cold or mean, that I enjoy making people suffer. Sometimes I do, but usually only when they deserve it. Mort, I get why you did this. You and Viviana don't have kids, but you were Deirdre's godparents. You cared for her like family. When she came to you for help, you didn't do this for money. You did it for her. Maitland looked at each of us before sighing heavily. I don't want to do this, but I can't ignore it either. I might regret this later. He pulled out his phone and dialed. Hi, can I talk to Mr. Edwards? It's important. Dallas? It's me, yes. We have to take a chance, Maitland said, his voice firm. I know he's your friend, but we have him, and they won't make a deal. There's no other option. We have an 85 to 90% chance of winning. This could be a big case. Crooked lawyers, rich people, fraud, betrayal. It might even become a movie one day. He paused, listening to the person on the other end of the phone, then handed it to Bailey. He wants to speak with you. Bailey listened for a couple of minutes, his expression growing more serious. You're serious, he finally said, handing the phone back to Maitland. Just give him the money, Mort. It's only $10 million. Stop this before it spirals out of control. Bailey leaned over to Deirdre, whispering urgently. Gutman tried to interject, but Bailey snapped, Shut up, you jerk! This is all your fault! If you hadn't been so selfish, none of this would have happened. But they've already threatened us, Deirdre said, glancing at me before quickly looking away. Everything has changed, Deirdre. Edwards has unleashed Maitland, and he won't let go once he grabs onto something. I don't want you to face what's coming. Just give McCarthy the money. Your boyfriend will move on. Finally, Deirdre looked at me directly. Okay, Michael. You win. Take your $10 million and leave. Let me be with the man I love, and that man is not you. Bailey signaled to Wilkes, who stood up and left the room. You'll have the money by tomorrow. I want it in half an hour, I insisted. A cashier's check. $10 million in half an hour? Bailey asked incredulously. The bank can do it, I replied. Wilkes nodded, and a secretary followed him out the door. Maitland sat next to me, pulling out his phone. Our officers are leaving. They'll inform your staff that this was a highly realistic exercise we conducted to teach police and lawyers about fraud cases. You kindly agreed to play the bad guys. Dr. Fairfax, you'll receive a certificate of appreciation. The documents will be destroyed. The same goes for Dr. Teller and Mr. Wilson. He scanned the room. I trust everyone here will keep this exercise a secret. If any false stories about today get out, it'll cause you a lot of trouble. Trust is crucial for your firm, and you can't afford to lose it. Bailey nodded grimly. I trust my team. The room fell into a tense silence. Whispers exchanged between people as Deirdre and her partner leaned in close, sharing quiet words and quick kisses. Maitland kept busy on his phone. A knock at the door interrupted the quiet, and the large officer who had taken Harper Stevens out earlier stepped inside, holding his wrist with blood dripping from cuts on his face. "Feeling better now?" Maitland asked. The officer gave a pained smile. "You should see the other guy. I'm taking him to the hospital." "How is he?" Matt Henry asked. "Broken leg for sure, maybe a concussion, lost some teeth. I didn't mean to hurt him that bad, but he put up a good fight." "You ready to make up?" Maitland asked. "Not really, but we're okay," the officer replied. "I need to get him to the university." Bailey pointed at Henry. "You go with them. Make sure they know it was an accident, and handle the forms and insurance." Henry nodded and left. About 35 minutes later, there was another knock at the door. The secretary, Marge, opened it to reveal a big man with thick black hair mixed with gray, carrying a briefcase attached to his wrist. "Mr. Bailey, thank Miss Hunt for being so quick," he said. I noticed a bulge under his coat, likely a firearm. Another man in nice clothes followed him, clearly private security. "Who gets the money?" the man asked. Bailey pointed at me. The man, Davidson, sat next to me and opened the briefcase with a key, revealing a thin business envelope. He handed it to me. "Please open it and check if it's a cashier's check for $10 million. Then you'll need to sign a form acknowledging receipt." I ran my thumb along the envelope's edge and opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper. The front showed a cashier's check with a 1 followed by 7 zeros. The back had the accompanying forms. Even though I was expecting it, seeing the check made it feel surreal. Just a piece of paper, but it carried the weight of everything that had happened. "This is what dreams are made of, right?" I said, looking at Davidson, who smiled, unfazed by the check. Handling millions was just another day at work for him. I glanced at Gutman, whose eyes blazed with anger. Seeing him suffer was a pleasure I didn't want to end. Bailey stared at the check too, clearly impatient. "All right, McCarthy, you've got your money. Sign the paperwork so we can wrap up the divorce." Feeling good, I said, "Can I get a nice cigar and a lighter?" Bailey sighed, exasperated. "Maitland, can you just get him out of here?" Maitland shrugged. "What harm is there in letting him enjoy a cigar? It's a big day for everyone." The secretary quickly returned with a cheap Cuban cigar and a simple lighter. I knew Maitland wasn't thrilled with me, but I took my time, savoring the moment. I clicked the lighter, letting the cigar catch fire slowly. As the end glowed bright, I held the cashier's check close to the flame, watching as it began to burn. Davidson tensed behind me, but then relaxed, realizing the money was already mine. The flames consumed the check slowly, turning white paper into black ash with red embers. The room was silent, the sound of burning paper like dreams disintegrating. Someone placed an ashtray near me. I held the check over it, letting the ashes fall. When it was done, I dropped the last piece into the ashtray, cleaned my hands, and looked at Bailey. The room was frozen in shock, disbelief etched on every face. To be continued. Hey audience, if you liked this video and want to keep up with more thrilling stories, make sure to subscribe to and hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss out on our upcoming adventures. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next wonderful story. Thanks for listening to One Infidelity Hit. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop us a like.